Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a couple of lingering members I hope will make it here in the next few minutes. Can we go ahead and have the call to order? We've got the call to order. Let's get a roll call, please.
Okay, Dr. Bophy? Dr. Bophy is not present. Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Davis is present. Ms. Edmonston? Here. Ms. Edmonston is present. Mr. Garvey? Here. Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Holloway? Here. Ms. Holloway is present. Dr. Jones?
Here.
Dr. Jones is present. Ms. Lewis? Ms. Lewis is not present. Ms. Orange Jones? Ms. Orange Jones is not present. Mr. Rock?
Present.
Mr. Rock is present. Dr. Thomason?
Present.
Dr. Thomason is present. Ms. Vautier? Here. Ms. Vautier is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we get started, I'm going to take a point of privilege here. Welcome a special guest that we have, an unusual guest at our meetings this morning. We have with us Governor and First Lady Edwards. Governor, if you would come to the front, I'll give you a few minutes. I understand you have a statement you'd like to make.
There we go. I'll try that again. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members, and Superintendent. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And obviously, we're talking about the MFP formula, and this is critically important for our state, for our students, for our teachers and support workers. You all have heard me saying for many months now that increasing teacher pay, support worker pay is my #1 priority in the legislative session that starts next month. And I think we're about to be one step closer to showing our teachers and our support personnel how much we appreciate the work they do for our children, but more importantly, how much we value our children and their education. And I'm grateful for the members of the task force who share my vision and supported the proposal that I am discussing with you today. Also want to thank the best teacher I know, who happens to be sitting behind me, for 30 years of wedded bliss this last week, and also for her role as an educator in our schools in Tangipahoa Parish, and her support for teachers. I like to think that we're all here today because of a teacher, or probably a bunch of teachers who challenged us, who made us better, who inspired us and to be the best that we can be. And I would ask you all to look at those teachers who did that for you and are largely responsible for the success that you all have been able to achieve, just like they're responsible for whatever success I've been able to achieve. And I think it's fair to say that as important as they are, teachers are also one of the most underappreciated professions in light of just how critically important they are. We ask an awful lot from them, and quite often we don't provide the resources necessary to support them the way that they ought to be supported. And when those teachers go too long without a raise, then we have real issues around teachers leaving the profession, leaving the classroom, and then we also have an inability to recruit the types of teachers and the number of teachers that we need in Louisiana. Louisiana has reported teacher shortages in just about every subject area. This is nothing new. I think it goes back to 2004. And we know that the overwhelming majority of teachers spend their own money in their classroom for supplies because the schools are not doing that for them. And so we need to improve funding that's available in the classroom beside teacher pay as well. And I believe that our inability to properly compensate our teachers is having an ability, as I said, an impact on our ability to recruit the best and brightest without losing them to other professions or potentially to other states. And I think you would agree with me that it's still true. The #1 ingredient for quality education is to have a highly motivated, well-educated professional teacher in the classroom teaching within his or her area of certification. I think it really is the most important ingredient. And I think we owe it to our teachers. And more importantly, we owe it to our students. And I guess one of the things that concerns me the most is we now have a number of young people who previously were interested in becoming teachers, and they're less interested today. And I think that we need to fix that. So what I'm proposing is no secret to you, is that we begin a multi-year process to bring our teacher pay back up to the average of the southern regional states, but that we make a good faith down payment on that process this year with a $1,000 raise per teacher and per certificated personnel, I guess I should say, in our schools. It's also important to me that we value the efforts of everyone working in the school building, because they're all important in educating our children, from those who clean the building to working in the cafeteria, the paraprofessionals, the school bus drivers. And so I'm also asking you all to support a $500 raise for school support personnel. I know that our teachers and our support personnel need and deserve more, but I want you to know this is just a start to get to the southern regional average. We have seen in other states that if we don't take action now, we're going to just continue to fall behind. And I think this is a realistic step because the funding is available to us. The economists who've been recommending the forecast for the REC have recommended enough additional new funding because the economy is performing so much better than they had originally thought, that we have the money available. The money that's necessary to do this is also in the executive budget proposal that we gave to the legislature a couple of weeks ago. And the investment in K through 12 that I'm asking you to do this year doesn't end there. I also propose that we increase the per pupil allocation in level 1 of the MFP by 1.375%. Historically, that allocation has been 2.75% on an annual basis, but we really haven't been able to do that in the last number of years. And in fact, Mr. Superintendent, I think the last time we were able to do that, you and I negotiated in the Speaker's Lounge. We put it in House Bill 1, and it was incorporated into the MFP in the following year. This is the better way to do it, I think. But that was good work, and we took advantage of an opportunity we had then. But we now have another opportunity today to give this increase. This allocation can be used by districts to provide for greater investment in school supplies, books, smart boards, cutting-edge technology. Again, directing this money to the classroom. And I think this would help relieve the burden that we talked about earlier with teachers spending out of their own pockets for supplies. And I believe it's a plan that we can all come behind and support. And it's overdue, it's critically necessary, and we have this opportunity to move Louisiana forward, show our teachers and support workers we appreciate them, and also make sure we're investing in our children and in the future of our state. So I'm asking that we move forward with that. I'm happy to take any questions that you all might have on my proposal. I don't think I proposed anything that's new for you all this morning. This is what we've been talking about for some time.
All right. Well, Governor, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for the opportunity we have in front of us here for increased funding. I think you said it best. You say our teachers and educators need and deserve more, and I hope we can continue to deliver on that moving forward.
Thank you very much, Tony. Appreciate you.
I'm sorry, I looked over here. You have a comment, Ms. Wiltshire?
I just wanted to thank the governor for proposing it and including the $140 million in the executive budget proposal. I know you've been a friend to education for years and years and years, and has done everything possible, including the last pay raise that the teachers were able to get several years ago. So I just want to thank you for your efforts to fund public education in the state of Louisiana. We certainly appreciate it, and I know we speak for all of the teachers and support personnel, and especially for our children and parents and community members, in thanking you for this effort that has been long overdue. And I'm really glad to hear you're saying that it may be the first of many, and hopefully the economy and the budget will support continued increases for teacher pay as well as support personnel in the state of Louisiana. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Doris. Appreciate that.
Ms.
Yes.
Holloway.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Edwards, and we're so appreciative of your proactiveness and moving forward for our educators. And as an educator, as some of us all are here advocating for this, that I just truly wish and desire that we're more proactive and not wait at the back end for a salary increase or anything for our educators, that we can continue on this level to be having that foresight of what's to come. What do we want ahead for our teachers? Because as educators, we are the ground level, that foundation for our economic development, for our students, for our children to remain in Louisiana. So I am just hoping that we as BESE members, our task force, and also our legislature, that we can continue to have that foresight and dream on, and for our educators. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Thank you again, Governor. Appreciate
Thanks, all of you. Appreciate you.
Okay, what's our first item of business?
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 4.1 and 6.1.
So move.
Thank you. And second by Ms. Holloway. So motion by Dr. Beaufort, second by Ms. Holloway. Any objection? No objection, motion carries. What is our next item of business?
Your first item is on page 45, item 4.2, consideration of LDE RSD contracts of $50,000 and over. The recommendation is to approve.
Can I get a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Garvey. I need a second. Can I get a second for the motion? Mr. Rock. Any questions or comments from the board? With no questions or comments, do I have any objection to the item? Hearing no objection, the motion carries. What is our next item?
On page 56, item 4.3, consideration of federal and state grants and allocations to LEAs, Type 2 charters, Type 5 charters, approved non-public schools, and community-based organizations, competitive and other. The recommendation is to approve.
Can I get a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Ms. Vaucher, I need a second. Ms. Holloway, any questions or comments on the item? Any objection to the motion? Hearing no objection, the motion carries. Next item, please.
On page 62, item 5.1, consideration of legislative reports. Additional backup was uploaded for this item on March the 8th, and a handout is being distributed right now. Additionally, revisions were made yesterday to the report in response to H.R. 31, and that handout is also being distributed. The recommendations are to amend the report in response to H.R. 31 as indicated on the handout, and authorize the LDE to resubmit to the legislature, to ratify the submission of the reports in response to SR 249, SCR 76, revised statute 17, section 264, revised statute 17, section 3883 to the legislature. Also to receive the report in response to RS 17, section 407.101, and to receive the report in response to RS 17, section 10.9.
All right, members, this has several pieces to it, so let's break this apart a little bit, and let's take as the first action, I'd like to get a motion to amend H.R. 31 as noted in your handout with authorization to resubmit.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Jones, a second. By Mr. Garvey. Any questions on this item? Superintendent, do you want to add something to that? Okay. Any questions or comments on that item? With none, is there any objection to that motion? None. This motion carries. For our next piece, let's look at ratifying, make sure I got this right. Okay, we want to ratify SR 249, SCR 76, revised statute 17264, and revised statute 1738883. All right, can I get a motion to ratify those reports? Mr. Rock moves. I need a second. Mr. Garvey. Any questions or comments on those items? Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, I'd like to comment that this report that we're sending to the legislature on the minimum foundation plan program and the cost of educating students is just a first step in our, I believe, in our attempts to determine a cost of educating our students, and that there will be more steps probably coming soon. I had heard some concerns that this might be the end of the project, but I don't think it is, and I wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. All right, let me make sure. Give me 1 second, members. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this particular item to ratify? Hearing none, any objection to that motion? With no objection to that motion, the motion carries. Our next, we want to break this apart or leave as one? Let's see. Let's do these separately. So the recommendation is to receive and ratify the submission of, oh, I'm sorry, look at the next thing here. Yeah, I want to receive the response to 17407-101. So that's on page 63, members, listed as number 2. So if I get a motion to receive that report. Ms. Holloway, any second?
So moved.
Mr. Rock moves. Members, we have some comment cards. Then we'll probably have some public comment, some board comment. Superintendent, did you want to add anything before I get going?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. We're on page 63. We're looking at what's labeled number 2 there, right where your pen is, that paragraph?
Early childhood.
That's correct. We're receiving the report reference there. Yes, ma'am. Okay. These are all speaking? Yes. All right, we got several comment cards. We'll go ahead and hear from the public, and then we'll go to board discussion on this item. If I could have Ms. Sarah Berthelot come down, please. Ms. Cindy Bishop come down. Ms. Susan East Nelson. And Ms. Charmaine, I'm sorry, I'm going to get your name wrong, Ms. Charmaine. Cassiope. As they're coming to the front, if I could also have Aaron Baskell come to the front row there. Ms. Karen Powell come to the front. Melanie Bromfin. Valerie Clicker. Anita Kennedy and Helen Damas. If y'all all come to the front to be prepared to speak. Are these also speaking? Here. Who wants to begin? We'll go down here, Miss Cindy. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name's Cindy Bishop, and I'm here on behalf of the Child Care Association of Louisiana. We're a statewide professional nonprofit serving the needs of child care providers and early childhood education teachers. I'd like to talk about the fact that we're very concerned that the executive budget does not include any funding to eliminate the waiting list for the Child Care Assistance Program. There are currently 3,300 children or families on the Child Care Assistance Program waiting list. Because of some issues, funding issues that have been brought to the attention of the community about the fact that the pre-K expansion grant, the $8.8 million, is going to expire this year in June. That could expand our roles for the Child Care Assistance Program to 10,000 families. That's devastating. Yesterday we got a note from a mother who said she just took a job in East Baton Rouge Parish and had to send her 3-year-old child to Monroe to live with the grandmother. And we don't want to have families separated, and we want to be able to serve the public with these funds. So I just wanted to make the pitch before BESE today that the Child Care Association of Louisiana is committed to working with BESE, the Governor's Administration, the legislature, to create the funding equities to fund early childhood education. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good morning. Susan East Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. I'd like to echo what Ms. Bishop just said before you, but I also want to add that there is no government investment that nets a higher return than an investment in early childhood. There's not a
Susan, pull that microphone a little closer, please. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
There is no government investment that nets a higher return than the investment in early childhood. There isn't one. So we can invest our dollars now in our children in early childhood from birth to 3, or we can pay later, further down in the education system. So we really absolutely must prioritize this funding for early childhood. Children and families rely on early childhood as an economic development must-have for the state of Louisiana. And as our children continue to perform 49th in the NEKC Kids Count Survey every year for the last 28 years, we need to invest in early childhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the board, Superintendent White, my name is Charmaine Cassiope, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President for United Way of Southeast Louisiana. I am here today to echo the concerns that you have heard by the two previous speakers, to say that we believe at the United Way of Southeast Louisiana there's no more important moral imperative we have than to ensure that our hardworking Louisiana families have access to high quality, affordable care for their children. This is not only a moral imperative for the children who are going to enter school ready to learn and to excel, but as was said before, there's an incredible importance placed on those parents who are working, who desperately need affordable child care. I know that the LAB to 3 report that you are receiving today will indicate that the Louisiana Early Caring Commission report requested that we look at providing $86 million. It is important that you know that these children, I believe, do not only belong to the state of Louisiana. United Way of Southeast Louisiana is excited to announce today that we are pumping a lot of our financial resources into improving access to high quality care and education. I can tell you as United Way's representative, I am also working with local municipal governments to ensure that they understand they have a role to play. In the commission report, I was quoted in that report for saying everybody has a fundamental moral obligation to do their part. United Way of Southeast Louisiana joined forces with United Ways across Louisiana to publish just recently the Alice Report. In our 7-parish region for United Way of Southeast Louisiana, some 49% of our families live at or below poverty. The need to invest in state-funded early child care is an imperative for those children and for those working families. And I'm pleased to say that United Way is asking that you recommend, please, to the state legislature that they reevaluate their budget priorities and provide funding for high quality early care and education. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
My name is Sarah Berthelot. I'm the president of the Louisiana Association of United Ways, and we provided a handout with our comment card. I'm not sure if you have it, but it's this one-sheeter, and I'll reference that in my comment today. I'm here to ask you to recommend to the legislature that they appropriate funds to early care and education as set forth to the LAB to 3 report on early child care and education, which calls for an investment of $86 million. The proposed budget does not include any new funding for early care and education. However, in the past 10 years, the Child Care Assistance Program has been cut, serving 40,000 children at one time, now only serving 15,000 children. And as we all kind of can imagine, this has had a major impact on so many Louisiana families. Today, the handout that I offer to you is information from the Alice report that Charmaine just referenced. This report was released on January 8th. ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. The report confirmed that in Louisiana, nearly 493,000, or 29% of all households in our state, face challenges in their pursuit of working to support their families. 29% of Louisiana families earn above the poverty level, but below a basic survival budget. In the handout, you'll find the anchor to our report, which is the quantification of a very basic and modest household budget. And this budget, basically what we're saying is that 29% of families do not meet this basic budget set forth. In this budget, you'll see that the single largest expense for an Alice family with 2 small children is child care, averaging $996 per month for 2 children. This expense has increased more than $300 over the past 2 years, while wages and basic family earnings have remained flat. Not achieving this basic survival budget means hard choices for Louisiana families, choices between food and medicine, and the quality of care that they provide to their babies. Increased funding to CCAP would help Alice and beyond secure quality care for their children while working or continuing training to advance in the workforce. This is good for both our children and our working parents. You can find more information on these Alice statistics for all parishes of Louisiana at launitedway.org, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I could have some of those that have been called to the front, I think I see that's have Ms. Kennedy, Ms. Damas, Ms. Clicker, and Ms. Bromfin come to the front. And if I go ahead and have Mrs. Darnister Nora and Ms. Cheryl Pointer come to the front row to be prepared to speak as well. While they're getting settled, let me note that Sherry Garisco as well as Ethan Malonzone support the report that's been received, do not wish to speak. Who wants to begin?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Valerie Winter, representing Institution Child Care and Development Center located on Camelot College here in Baton Rouge. I would like to first thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of much needed CCAP funding for the low-income, economically disadvantaged, single-parent college students who have children in our Child Development Center. With the new quality child care guidelines, the cost of paying high-quality instructors is very high. I am here today to humbly and respectfully ask that you recommend to the legislature that they fund early child care in education as called for the LAB and 3 report. CCAP provides subsidized for the child care funding for children of our low-income parents who are desperately trying to elevate their families by obtaining a career in the medical field. We presently have 35 children in our child care whose parents are on the waiting list to be funded. The president of Camelot College and our daycare, Pastor Ronnie Williams, is presently paying the daycare costs for these children out of his private funds until funding is received to help the parents of these children to complete their education and make up into their career job in the medical field. Without Pastor Williams' long-term faithfulness in helping many of our child development parents who they depend on the government assistance in subcultural life without ever having a chance to succeed and raise children in the environment that lead to crime and criminal activities. Over the past 33 years, thousands of our Camelot College graduates are now working in career jobs, and they are successful Americans because CCAP has assisted them for child care. There is a desperate need for our low-income families that are long overdue for funding. Thank you for your serious consideration of this urgent matter, and on behalf of the president of Camelot College, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. I'm Karen Powell, and I am the director of the Child Care Resource and Referral Division of Volunteers of America, Greater Baton Rouge. And I'm here today to ask that you recommend to the legislature that they appropriate funds for the report in front of you, the LA Birth to 3 report. We know that 90% of brain development occurs before children are age 3. We have seen that an investment in early care and education provides an extremely high return on investment. We know that the skills that children develop in early childhood, especially social and emotional skills, are a very high predictor of long-term economic and academic success. And we know that stable child care is critical to a strong workforce in Louisiana. We also know that CCAP seats have been cut significantly over the last decade. And as we just heard from one of our child care providers, it's critical that we support families in being able to work and know that their children are in safe and quality care. So we recommend that you give serious consideration to this urgent matter. It's time to grow this investment in early childhood. We can't afford to keep putting that off.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Anita Kennedy. I'm the director and owner of Kennedy's Child Care Academy, located in Gretna. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I'm speaking on behalf of the parents. I get calls every single day that are looking for child care. They're looking and they're not understanding that there is a wait list. They say, oh, I applied online. You applied online, but there is a wait list. I had a parent just the other day called me with twins. She just acquired a job. She has to find child care, someone to take care of the twins. There's no one available. She cannot afford my rate. We're a high quality center, 4-to-1 ratio. And for her to even think about affording my rate would mean that she would not be able to work. So right now, we just desperately need assistance for these parents. There's so many out there, low-income families. They are trying to work. They're all trying to go to school. They're all trying to better their lives and become gainfully employed, but unable to afford the child care assistance, a child care rate. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Helen Dumas, and I have been in the child care field for a very long time, more than 40 years. I'm the owner and director of Candyland Kinder College, located in Marrero, Louisiana. And I'm also asking for a recommendation for funding for the child care assistance. I currently have a parent now. He's just acquired his children. He has four young children. He works in the police field, and he does not have any type of child care because he's sitting on, his application is on the waiting list. And in order to get the children off the waiting list, they have to, for number one, have a special need or homelessness. So it's not a need for the parents who actually have children that's there going from person to person, and most of his family are out of town. So he's desperately trying to find somewhere for his children to go to not be cared for in a proper manner, because right now we're currently proficient, a 4-star quality center, and it's so important for our young children, birth to 3 years old, to have a basic foundation. Young children going from place to place, and right now in our society, you don't know where you're leaving your children. They come back and they have all kinds of languages they're learning. They're doing all kinds of things that's just not appropriate because they don't have the right type of environment for their young children to be in. So right now we're begging with all that we can to put that money or to fund or to make that recommendation for the funding for child care assistance and also the wait list. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Bronfin with the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. I'm here today to ask you to not only receive the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission report, but also that you request the legislature to fully fund and implement the Commission's recommendations, including the recommendation for $86 million in new, well, not new, but restoring the state investment in the Child Care Assistance Program. I want to be clear, though, this is not about funding early childhood and not funding K through 12 or not funding higher ed. On the contrary, of course, now that our state finally has revenues to spend, our very top priority must be education if we are ever going to move forward. And of course, everyone in this room is an audience that would agree with me on that. But it needs to be birth through kindergarten, through 12th grade, and higher ed as well. There are literally thousands of children on the Child Care Assistance Program waitlist. This is the only state program we have for children under age 4. To be on the wait list, as you've heard, the parents already have to be working, low income, or in school or in job training. So this means that they are already working, they're in need of child care, but they're getting no assistance in being able to afford quality care. Child care costs in our state almost as much as a public college tuition, over $7,000 a year, according to the market rate survey. So what's happening? We know these parents are working, and it's very likely, therefore, that these children are in low quality, probably unlicensed, unregulated care. These children are coming to you. They'll be with you in kindergarten, wherever they are first, and no doubt, their first day in school, they will already be behind. And you will be spending even more money trying to catch them up. Because we have underfunded this for 10 years, all we've done is cut this program. There's been no new investment for 10 years. In fact, there's been disinvestment of the state funding and the TANF funds that were part of it. So we need to simultaneously, of course, fund birth through 3, as well as K through 12 and higher ed, or all we'll do is keep chasing our tails and chasing our tails and never moving forward as a state. Please help us to restore the funding for early care and education now, because thousands of children and their working parents need quality care today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Stornester Nori. I am a 5-star center, a center of excellence, and I'm located in Kenner, Louisiana. And saying that, I am also an entrepreneur. I'm a director and owner of Spring Ridge Academy. And what the fundings that we're asking you for today is to aid and to put our state in a better position. When we invest in our youngest and our brightest, then we have a future. We have a brighter future for tomorrow, for today. So we're asking you to invest, to make that investment in our youngest and our brightest so that we can have a future in the state of Louisiana. We're on the front lines every day. We feel the pain. We feel the hurt of our parents when they come inside of our facilities. And being a 5-star center, they cannot afford to have high quality child development or early services for their child. So it is vital, it is so important that we do invest as a state within our children and our families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Cheryl Pointer, and I am the owner and director of Treasures from Heaven Child Care and Learning Center here in Baton Rouge. For 2 consecutive years, we have been awarded a 5-star rating here in Baton Rouge using the Class 2. I am excited to be able to sit here today to represent the parents and other child care centers. I strongly support the recommendation to invest funding in early childhood education. I do believe that they are, in their foundation, they gain so much. Studies has proven that children that are in quality early childhood education programs with effective teacher-child interaction, they gain a greater ability to communicate better. We teach them advanced language. We teach them how to interact with their peers. And the studies prove that these gains last through 3rd grade. We want children to enter kindergarten ready. A lot of parents are not allowed to, not able to afford quality childhood education. Therefore, they're keeping their children at home. Grandparents or neighbors are keeping the children, which lessen their ability to be able to go into kindergarten ready. So I highly recommend funding for child care assistance to be able to assist the parents in gaining access, not to just any child care center, but high quality child care centers. Again, if they don't have funding, their children are not in these quality programs, and they're going to enter kindergarten not able to read, not able to interact effectively with their peers. And we also know that study proved that even with the 3rd grade reading scores determines the prison rates. So we want to lessen the prison rates as well as making sure that the children are ready to interact and enter into these programs. So again, I stand and I, on behalf of other child care centers, and ask you to strongly consider investing these fundings in early childhood programs where it's well needed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies. Also want to read into the record, Mr. Arwen Basco with the Kingsley House supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Supports recommendations of the report. That's all of our comment cards to the public. Members, do you have any comments or questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes, as was pointed out repeatedly by the speakers, the motion that's on the floor is to receive this report, but it's missing something. There's nothing in the current motion that puts BESE on the record asking the legislature to allocate money for this problem. I would have to imagine that sometime during this next legislative session, some legislators are going to ask, well, where does BESE stand on this? We know that BESE commissioned this report and sent it to us, but there's nothing saying that BESE supports additional funding for this problem. So I'd like to make a motion that we urge the legislature to put more money into this. I believe a copy of a resolution that has been passed around, and it has a lot of whereas, but the bottom line is that it is asking the legislature and the governor to support increased funding for early childhood care and education as recommended by the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission. Has everybody had a chance to look at this? No? Maybe we should take a minute, but my motion is to amend the current motion that's on the table on the floor to add this resolution, so we would be receiving the report and adopting this resolution asking for funding.
So would that be a substitute motion for Ms. Holloway's motion to receive?
It would be an amendment to the current motion to receive and to support this resolution, and to send this resolution to the legislature and the governor.
If it's an amendment, then you'd have a motion to add that on there. I need to get a second for that motion.
So move.
From Dr. Bofi. Let me read this resolution, if I could.
Before you read it, tell me, where did this come from?
This was created through the department for we've looked at this as a possible way to handle this.
Okay.
Dr. Jones, you had a question?
Just a technical question. Would this actually be your motion would actually be to accept the report and to ratify this resolution? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. So let me just take a moment. I'll go ahead and read the resolution out loud for everyone. A resolution to urge and request the Louisiana legislature and the governor to support increased funding for early childhood care and education as recommended by the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, established through Act 639 of the 2018 regular session. Whereas in 2012, the Louisiana legislature passed and the governor signed into law Act 3 to create a comprehensive and integrated network through which to manage and oversee all programs funded through state or federal resources that provide early childhood care or educational services. And whereas in the Act, the legislature declared its intent that a comprehensive and integrated delivery system for early childhood care and education be created to ensure that every child enters kindergarten healthy and ready to learn. And whereas in 2014, the Louisiana legislature passed and the governor signed into law Act 868, which transferred oversight and administration of licensing and regulation of early learning centers from the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services to the Louisiana Department of Education, as well as lead agency status for the federally established Child Care Assistance Program, otherwise known as CCAP. And whereas no additional funding was provided to implement these critical reforms, and whereas in response to these directives and using competitive and increased federal formula dollars, the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and the LDE, in consultation and collaboration with the Early Childhood Care and Education Advisory Council and numerous stakeholders, have unified a once fragmented system of early childhood care and education into a statewide unified network comprised of 65 local community networks that include every publicly funded pre-kindergarten, child care, and Head Start program across Louisiana. And whereas community networks now offer local coordinated enrollment systems that support families in identifying the best programs for their children, and whereas in 2017, Louisiana became the first state in the nation to release a performance profile for every publicly funded early childhood site, giving Louisiana families valuable information about the quality of early childhood care and education options in their communities. And whereas the LDE is supporting improved teacher-child interactions through increased access to high-quality curricula, training, coaching, and teacher preparation. And whereas effective July 1, 2017, as a result of overwhelming demand from working parents and a shortage of funds, the LDE established a wait list for eligible families who applied to the CCAP, which now stands at approximately 3,300 eligible working families who remain unfunded. And whereas the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, established through Act 639 of the 2018 regular session, found that due to inadequate funding, the current system cannot meet present and anticipated future needs, particularly for children birth to 3 years old, and that this gap negatively impacts children's learning and their families' participation in Louisiana's workforce, as evidenced by there are 173,000 children in need, birth to 3 years old, living in Louisiana. 2 out of 3 children under the age of 5 have both parents or their single parent working. Few quality early care and education options are available to Louisiana families, which has resulted in the state's economy losing $1.1 billion due to absences related to child care breakdowns. Significant research shows that for every $1 invested in high quality early care, the state yields a $7.30 return on investment. And whereas the Commission recommended a bold and ambitious early childhood care and education agenda called Louisiana B to 3, calling for an investment of $85.8 million to expand quality seats to 114,000 Louisiana children in need, prioritizing children birth through 3. And whereas the Commission's recommendations include financial support to ensure quality and evidence-based voluntary family support services, and whereas the Governor's proposed fiscal year 20 budget does not contain any increased funding for early childhood care and education, nor does it address the expiration of federal dollars next year, and whereas as the legislature considers much needed increases in public elementary and secondary school funding, teacher salaries, higher education funding, TOPS, and juvenile justice, it is imperative that strong consideration be given to supporting the entire continuum of education, including funding of child care centers that receive an average of less than $6,000 per child and child care teachers who are paid an average of $8.95 per hour. Therefore, be it resolved that the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education does hereby urge and request the Louisiana Legislature and Governor John Bel Edwards to support the funding and implementation of the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission's recommendations. Be it further resolved that the State Board urges and requests the House Appropriations Committee and Senate Finance Committee to convene a special hearing in which to hear the Commission's findings and recommendations, receive public testimony, and consider funding needs and available financial resources. Be it further resolved that the State Superintendent of Education transmit a copy of this resolution to the Governor, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the House and Senate Committees on Education, the House Appropriations Committee, and the Senate Finance Committee to accompany the proposed fiscal year 20 minimum foundation program formula for consideration of increased financial support of all of Louisiana's young learners. I've never read so much in public in my life.
That is a mouthful.
Thank you all for putting up with that.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that last. Could you read it again?
Section what? So members, you have the resolution in front of you there. We do have a motion now for an amendment to the original motion to receive the report. To cover this, we'd have any questions or comments at this point, then we would have to approve this amendment to add to the original motion and then discuss and vote on that motion. Do you have any discussion on this amendment?
I have a question, but it's not about the amendment.
Okay, then let's go ahead, and if there's not any questions on the amendment, is there any opposition to the amendment? Hearing no opposition, the motion in front of you now is to receive the report as well as ratify the resolution that you've just been read. Any comments from the board? Dr. Bofi, is this the point where you'd have the question or no?
Sure. I want to ask you, Mr. Davis, what keeps us from putting early childhood in the MFP?
The Constitution, in short. As constitutional outline now for K-12 funding, not for early childhood.
So we would have to change the Constitution in order for us to have any...
Through the MFP.
Through the MFP.
Correct.
Or we need some other mechanism for us to be able to establish funding for early childhood. Is that right? Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board? With no other questions or comments, any objection to the motion? Hearing no objection, the motion carries. Thank you all. What's our next item? Our next item is to finish up this one, actually, it looks like, which is, I need a motion to receive the report for OJJ. This is listed on page 64, members, in your book. It's listed as number 3.
So moved.
Moved by Thomason. Who's my second over here? Mr. Garvey. Any questions or comments on this report? With no questions or comments, any opposition to the motion? With no opposition to correct. Correct. With no opposition, the motion carries. What is our next item of business?
On page 155, item 7.1, consideration of the minimum foundation program formula for 2019-2020. Handouts are being distributed on this item. The materials were uploaded earlier this week to board docs. Those are being handed out at this time. An updated exec rec is also being distributed. The recommendation is to approve per the revised executive recommendation.
Members, you have the handout. It's coming around right now. Do I have a motion to get discussion started?
I'll do it for discussion purposes only.
Absolutely. I need a second to open discussion. So motion by Dr. Jones, second by Ms. Holloway. Superintendent, if you want to start off, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Members, first I want to thank you for endorsing the resolution that you just endorsed. There could not be a more critical issue for our state's future, and it is a gaping hole in the current budget proposal that there is no additional funding for early childhood, so I thank you for supporting that effort. As you know, we began discussions with the governor, and BESE was represented in many of those discussions quite some time ago about teacher pay raises. And I am thrilled to be here today submitting to you an MFP recommendation that includes $101 million for teachers and support staff, for a restricted line in the MFP of $101 million that must be spent on that amount of money, on that particular expense. Secondly, I'm also thrilled to be submitting an MFP recommendation to you that includes $36 million, a 1.25% increase in the base per pupil rate that is unrestricted. And I recognize that much debate will likely ensue today about 2% 2% of the expenses that we have recommended go toward districts' expenditures on dual enrollment, on career and technical education, on fair and equitable test preparation, and on enrichment courses in level 4 of the formula. This, during the testimony in the first MFP task force, by the data that I have seen, is clear. There is not fair access to dual enrollment courses. There is not fair and equitable access to career and technical courses. There is not fair and equitable access to ACT preparation, to college counseling supports, to foreign language, to music, to arts. And in light of that pressing need, we have proposed this expenditure. Now, I'm not naive. I've been in conversations with many of you over the last week about this, and I know that this will be a point of discussion. My job is to take the testimony, to take the evidence, and to provide to you the best formula that we believe meets the needs of Louisiana's children. And it is my belief that if you're going to endorse a $101 million restricted grant to prescribe salaries, a $3 million prescripted grant to deliver value to Louisiana's children for dual enrollment and career and technical education is only the right thing to do in this formula. I look forward to the testimony. I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Superintendent. Members, I'll let you know we have a number of public comment cards. And if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and hear the public comment, and then we'll go to board discussion and anything we want to go from there. Is that okay with the board? All right. 3 minutes. In light of the number of cards we did earlier, if you didn't notice, we do 3 minutes for organization, so don't be surprised by that when you get to the front. If I could have Mr. Michael Falk please come to the front, Ms. Janet Pope, Mr. James Madden, and Ms. Eva Kim.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, board, represent the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, and we would appreciate your consideration regarding the issues associated with the 1.25% recommendation that's being presented in the draft resolution and the original 1.375% increase recommended by just about all of the members of the MFP task force. We'd like to see consideration given to the 1.375%. We anticipate increases in mandated expenses the upcoming fiscal year. Increased expenditures in employee benefits, 1.45% Medicare that's not covered by the salaries and the proposed retirement benefits. The increase in workers' comp and unemployment compensation because of the increases in salaries, the increased use of technology in school systems across the state, the increased purchase and implementation of curriculum, resources, and materials for teachers to use in the classroom. This additional funding would help offset those expenses. We have not had an increase in the base per pupil amount since 2014-15. And that increase, 50% of it, was mandated that it go to teacher salaries and benefits. This additional funding will help us. With that said, we request that you reject the proposed MFP resolution from the Louisiana Department of Education and accept the recommendation from the MFP task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falk.
Good morning, Chairman Davis, Superintendent White, and BESE members. My name is Janet Pope. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana School Boards Association, and we echo the Superintendents Association and Mr. Falk's comments earlier. We ask you to consider the 1.375 as our school systems would like local autonomy and maybe getting more curriculum, increased cost and benefits for teachers as well. So we ask for your consideration on the 1.375 as recommended by the MFP task force. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Superintendent and members of the board.
Make sure the green light's on and pull the mic close.
My green light is on? Yeah. All right. I'm here to speak in support of the funding supplement to support dual enrollment and career and technical education. And to say that the Kane Center and LSU cooperate in assuring that dual enrollment courses are of quality equal to those courses that are taken by students on campus. We've developed a number of mechanisms to assure that. So what I want to say basically is that money spent on dual enrollment, it will be well spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Eva Kemp, and I'm the State Director at Democrats for Education Reform here in Louisiana. This morning, I just want to speak in support of the MFP increase, specifically around teacher pay raises and support staff pay raises as well. As a former teacher here in Baton Rouge and then in East Louisiana Parish, I remember what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck and to also have to buy classroom supplies for my students. So I just wanted to express that this morning. We all recognize that, of course, it's not the amount that we would like it to be, and I look forward to hearing from the legislature and the administration in the next few months about what the plans are to increase that over the next few years. But I look forward to working over the next few months to making sure this gets over the finish line during legislative session. So thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. If I could have Ms. Sarah Vandergriff come to the front, Mr. David Helveston, Adam Bourne, and Cynthia Posey, please.
Good morning. Sarah Vandergriff with the Charter School Association. First and foremost, we would like to at least thank you all for recommending an increase in the MFP. On the one side for the teachers, just within New Orleans alone, we saw 30% of the teacher workforce leave last year. So we know that we have to do better by our teachers. And New Orleans is just one part of the state that is a growing trend for everyone in terms of reduced participants in the college teacher programs and people quickly leaving the teacher workforce. So we are supportive of the increase. We are also supportive of the recommendation for the increase in dual enrollment in terms of helping better prepare our students for life beyond high school. We have to be doing better by them through their K-12 experience so that they have as many options available as possible. And we are at least happy or pleased to see some sort of increase the general first level of the MFP, since we have not had one in too many years. We will echo the sentiments of the superintendents and the school board associations that we wish that it would be more, because going towards the teacher experience, it goes much more beyond pay, but also their experience in the classroom. And we know that we are not providing the teachers and students the resources they need, and that can only come through funding from the general increase for the MFP. Our executive director, Caroline Romer, who's a member of the task force, has been long on record saying that we should always be pushing for the 2.75 general increase in order to keep up with inflation. So we would just like to be on the record that we are grateful to see some sort of increase in the MFP, but we know that we as a state could be doing better in terms of setting a priority for our students in the K-12 experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, my name's Adam Bourne. I'm the executive director of NOTEP, which is New Orleans Technical Education Provider. We teach, excuse me, we teach NCCER Level 1 and Level 2 courses, OSHA 10 courses, job readiness and job connection for high school students, particularly in the skilled craft sector and high-wage, high-demand fields in the skilled craft sectors. I want to speak specifically regarding the increase in funding for the Supplemental Course Academy. As a Supplemental Course Academy leader, I can tell you that the per pupil funding right now covers like 5% of our cost. So it's a pretty small number in comparison to what it actually costs to offer these courses. And so our schools have recognized that for us to implement Jumpstart in our area, it's essential that we use supplemental course academies to offer some of these courses that are necessary for kids to be along these pathways. So even though the funding doesn't cover all of our costs, they've pulled together other funds to help cover the cost of courses like ours. So this increase would be tremendous in, number one, in immediately allowing us to serve more students. We don't have to turn away students, but schools have to limit their number of spots that they enroll students in. So this would give them the opportunity to enroll some more students. I think it also would be a great long-term step towards us being able to serve more students and offer more courses and more pathways, more of those high-wage, high-demand pathways. So that'd be tremendous for us. We do a lot of work with at-risk youth, students who have not been successful in school in lots of different kind of ways, and we've had a lot of success with those students. And so increase in this pool would allow us to do more of that, and so we'd appreciate that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm David Hulveston with Associated Builders and Contractors, and I'm here to speak in support of the MFP Task Force, specifically the recommendation around career and technical education. I'd like to commend this board and the department on the work that they've done around Jumpstart. When I visit with my peers nationally, they view Louisiana as a leader in career and technical education. This is one of the things that we are seen as a leader in the country, and it's really the policy framework that you as a board have established with the department. And while the department is soliciting feedback for Jumpstart 2.0, and there'll be some tweaks, the real thing that we need to see is sustainable funding for career and technical education that ensures that every student in the state has access to high-quality, rigorous career and technical education programs that leads to employment opportunities. That's what we all want to see. And so we have to have funding available for that opportunity. I hear from employers in the construction industry all the time that they want to hire more individuals from high school with the meaningful industry-based credentials that the Jumpstart pathways provide. We have to fund that properly, and I think that the task force recommendations are a huge step forward in that direction. At ABC, we are a course choice provider. We provide opportunities across 9 parishes, 36 high schools right now participate in our programs in areas much like our friend here in welding, in electrical, in millwright, and pipe fitting. These students have opportunities to go directly into the workforce and to continue their careers at the post-secondary level with community and technical colleges or with ABC. We hear 2 things consistently. Employers want more students coming out of these programs, and the districts want the ability to put more students into these programs. So the policy framework is there. I applaud you on that. The demand is there, both from industry and from the students and from the districts. Now we have to ensure that we fund it properly, and this is a big first step towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. And read into the record, Mr. Larry Carter is going to be speaking as opposed to Ms. Posey.
Good morning, board members. My name is Larry Carter, President of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers. Good morning. My name is Larry Carter, President of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers, and I certainly thank you for allowing me to speak today. In 2012, we passed drastic education reform measures which asked more of our teachers, school employees, and students in K-12 and early childhood education. Yet we have not consistently funded the MFP since 2009. Not only has Louisiana not given our students the resources they need to succeed, it hasn't provided for teachers to have the professional salaries, the professional development, resources, and support they deserve in order to attract and keep the best and brightest educators in the classrooms here in our state. It has been acknowledged in previous MSP task force meetings that neither the base per pupil amount nor the traditional 2.75 inflationary increase are based on any type of funding calculation. As noted in the meeting materials, BESE has declined to have a study done to find an accurate amount because the study is too expensive, despite a directive from the legislature to do so. As a study by the Louisiana Budget Project showed, students have lost $4.4 billion of level 1 funding since 2008. Nationally, funding for higher education ranks last in the nation, and early childhood education is so inadequately funded that there are 3,000 families on waiting lists for aid, with some employees making as little as $8.95 an hour. It is time to stop pitting Louisiana's education community against each other. We're asking both you, BESE board members, and the legislature to approve the MFP formula recommended by the MFP task force and to stand up for our educators and children for early childhood education to higher education and to take on the hard task of finding money to adequately fund all education in Louisiana. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could have
hang around, I'm going to ask.
We'll call him back down if we need him. He'll be here. All right, Ms. Moe, if you can come to the front. Mr. Danny Garrett, Miss, I'm going to mess this name up, Mike, would you say that? And Bridget Nealon, Dr. Keith Leger, please.
Debbie Moe, representing the Louisiana Association of Educators. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for considering increases in pay for our certified personnel and our non-certified support personnel. It is extremely important that this year be the year that we show the respect and give our educators the due that they are so deserving of. When employers value their employees, they show it often by not only status, but also by increasing their pay. We don't think that it's enough. Obviously, nobody does, but we think it is the right step in the right direction. And we look forward to BESE continuing to honor the employees that work in our school districts in the years to come. We do need to reach the Southern Regional average. I would also like to comment on the fact that the recommendation by the MFP task force has been changed. We believe that our school districts are in desperate need of the money that would be coming their way with the 1.375. And we at the Louisiana Association of Educators would like to see the MFP task force recommendation honored. Anytime a school district is not given money, that means something is not funded. When that something that's not funded is resources in a classroom, that means that I or we as teachers have to reach into our own pockets to make sure that our students are receiving those resources. So I would ask the MFP task force to honor I would ask the BESE to honor the MFP task force recommendation. It is extremely important that we make sure that the needs of our school districts and the needs of our educators are covered in this MFP formula. As little as it will be a much needed and much appreciated increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Danny Garrett, representing the Louisiana School Boards Association. I was privileged to be in the discussions throughout. Okay, there we go. Danny Garrett, Louisiana School Boards Association. The Louisiana School Boards Association has been involved in the discussions about this opportunity for an increase in public education funding that, because of the fiscal constraints of the states, simply was not available in many prior years. I think that there was a general consensus through meetings with the superintendent, meetings with members of BESE, on the way to get there. I think that consensus was reflected in the virtually unanimous vote by the MFP task force. And if anybody's ever been to an MFP task force meeting, many of you have, it is a very diverse group of political opinions. And for all of those people, save one, to come to an agreement on the methodology to reach this is amazing and should be honored. That is a 1.375 increase in level 1 and the 100-500 increase for teacher pay. Now, certainly, school districts would have loved to have had full flexibility on all the money, because there are districts whose teachers are above the Southern Regional average. But the goal was to ensure that all teachers participated in this pay raise. Well, LSBA has always supported SCA, but moving the money from level 1 into SCA restricts its use. So for districts that are already doing a phenomenal job doing that, for example, Vermilion. Vermilion, at no cost to their students, allows them to take up to 4 dual enrollment classes. So you get out of high school, you've almost got a semester of college knocked down. Now, they have the fiscal wherewithal to do that. Other districts do not. Some districts don't even have the ability to spend the current SCA dollars they have. They are redirected other places. But if you put the money in level 1, as recommended by the MFP task force, those that need to direct it to dual enrollment and to Jumpstart 2.0 have the ability to do so. If you dedicate it in SCA, those districts who don't need it for that purpose, but do need to make up for deferred maintenance and for curricular upgrades, have just that less money to spend on those acute needs. So we would ask you to consider an amendment to what was proposed by the administration to reinstate the 1.375 in level 1. Additionally, there is a bit of a technical amendment that needs to be considered, and that is in the pay raises, it's dedicated to the October 1, 2019 PEP report. In the event this resolution would have to carry over, as has happened in prior years, that would mean that next year the pay raise funding would be related to a year-old PEP report. So I think you need to remove the year date and just make it associated with an October 1 PEP report. That way, if it has to be used in a subsequent year, then you don't end up with that anomaly. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Mayuk Ray Chowdhury. I'm the Director of High School Programs at an organization called Operation Spark. We are a SCA provider. We operate in New Orleans, and we teach software development to high school students as well as to an adult workforce development program. I'm here in support of the recommendation, specifically as to funding for career and technical education via SCA. There are currently thousands of high-wage jobs available across the state in this field. We work directly with our employer partners, DXC, GE Digital, iSeats, and other companies in the region, and they are desperate for students, graduates with these skills. We continue to expand and build capacity across the state to reach more students, especially in northern Louisiana and places we haven't been yet. The limitation is that school districts are limited in their funding. They don't have enough SCA funds for all the kids that are interested in these programs. We currently have wait lists in several parishes of students who are sophomores and are planning on taking our courses their senior year. So an increase in SCA funds would allow students across the state access to these high-wage career pathways. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Bridget Nealon with Stand for Children, Louisiana. I am here today in support of the MFP resolution as presented today. We are in support because we believe it is a start. Professional teachers deserve a raise and more dollars into the classroom, in particular in support of teacher salaries, are essential to recruit and retain excellent teachers. However, we strongly support early childhood learning, and we do appreciate the resolution that you just passed, but we do wish that there was more assurance of additional state funding for early education learning. We believe it is a critical priority, and the fact that there is no assured funding at this point is indicative, once again, of our state leadership not addressing urgent needs. We are 26 in state funding, yet last in outcomes. If we addressed some of the critical needs, such as the UAL in state pension systems, the $900 million in interest in 1 year could be put toward classroom needs, such as teacher pay or early childhood education. We'd also like to see additional transparency so that we could track where these dollars go and find out where they're being spent better in the classroom. That also brings me to my final comment, which is in support of the additional dollars that go directly to students via dual enrollment or career tech education. What better use of state dollars than direct needs for students? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Leger, are you going to speak or you wait?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Keith Leger, representing Council for the Better Louisiana. $1,000 pay raise is not enough. Our hope is that we will continue to prioritize funding for teacher salaries and not just during election year. Cable has always been and will continue to be supportive of as much funding as possible to reach our students. We support the proposal of earmarking a small percentage that is being sought to increase the MFP general fund to go to course choice and dual enrollment. Although I wasn't fortunate enough to have the new Louisiana student standards when I was in school, simple math tells me that this is 0.02% of the total proposed increase. This is a very small amount that reaches students directly with a significant return on investment. In summary, in a potential $140 million increase in the MFP, sending approximately $100 million directly to teachers and approximately $36 million directly to school boards, with only approximately $3 million directly to students is not an unreasonable ask. We ask that you support the proposed MFP formula. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that's all of our public comments. At this time, I'll turn it over to questions or comments from the board. Ms. Vaucher?
Okay. I've been involved in this discussion on many levels, not only for this 1920 proposed MFP, but for many, many, many in the last 45 years. The proposal before us today is in slight contradiction to what the MFP task force recommended and the Superintendent's Advisory Council recommended as well. I'm glad to see that it seems like everyone is in agreement in terms of teacher pay raises, and thanks to the proposal that is coming out, we're looking at hopefully the first of maybe multiple pay raises for teachers as we start with the $1,000 per year and the $500 for support personnel. The increase in the base per pupil, when years ago we took a look at this, we intended in the state to increase this by 2.75% each year. The way the economy has been in the, I guess, recent past, that has not been able to be done. So school systems have lacked in the resources necessary to implement all programs consistently, as well as take care of the employees. What has come out of the MFP task force and the Superintendent's Association is a very reasonable request, the $1,500 pay raise, and then the 1.375 increase in the per pupil. Now, we had an MFP task force meeting in October where that proposal, the first part of the proposal was discussed on the pay raise. And then there were other topics discussed that the administration highlighted for possible increase, one of which was the supplemental course allocation. But there were several others that were mentioned as well, especially the high cost for special education services that directly affect children. And we know as administrators in school systems that we spend far in excess of what is given to us through the MFP for those services for our most vulnerable students. School security was another issue discussed there. The training of our teachers or potential teachers in these new teacher preparation residency programs that this board has endorsed and mandated in conjunction with the colleges and universities throughout our state. In fact, we've got that funding that will be withdrawn after this next year for the $2,000 residency or the $2,000 allocation for each of our potential student teachers in their residency year. So we have districts that are scrambling to fund those particular positions. We have tremendous need in increasing the amount that we spend on curriculum resources to get or to buy and purchase the Tier 1 curriculums that are recommended by the State Department is extremely costly. And it's very difficult to keep up with that on a year-by-year basis because most of these materials are consumable, which means it's a recurring cost every year. The technology needs are massive. We're going to, or we have arrived at online testing throughout the state, and the platform necessary to accommodate that testing has increased. Some of the older technology devices that are used are now obsolete and have to be purchased again. These are continual recurring costs. So when you look at all the needs of our students, the career and tech ed area has flourished and is doing extremely well, and it is a need. But there are multiple needs, and there are differing needs among all of our school districts. Some district may be heavily invested in the SCA, in the supplemental course allocations, and are doing very well and have adequate resources to provide for students and to supplement. There are other districts that return some of this money. It goes unspent because they have accommodated the needs of the students in their areas. There are other districts that are crying out for additional resources for our special needs students, where what we get through the MFP is not adequate, and the local costs that we have to supplement with to provide what is mandated and necessary for these children is excessive. I don't want to say excessive. It's very costly for them to get the free and appropriate public education. The technology needs, the curriculum needs, and it differs parish by parish, school district by school district. So the whole intent of the increase to the 1.375 in the per pupil allows every local district to put that money where the need exists within their district. If that need is in increased CTE courses, it'll be put there, or some of it will be put there. If the need is in increasing the technology resources in their district, if the higher need is there, it will be put in that area. If the need is the special education area, it will be put there. So this money is extremely important to be used in each school district where that particular need exists. Now, while we discussed many of these different needs in the October MFP task force meeting, it was decided at that point, let's wait till we get closer, see what the executive budget looks like, and see what we can then bring to BESE as an MFP task force as a recommendation. On February 21st, there was a meeting of the Superintendent's Advisory Council, which all the representatives for the superintendents around the state met on February 21st. The proposal before them at the time was the 1.375 increase in the per pupil, along with the pay raise. And that was, if you look at the minutes for that, not only was that report received, it was endorsed by all the superintendents around the state of Louisiana. Then on February 28th, the MFP task force met, and what was discussed there, and the almost unanimous recommendation, all but one, recommendation from the MFP task force was the pay raise and the 1.375 increase. Earmarking some of this money specifically for the CTE courses was not discussed with either group, and that was just 2 weeks ago. So at this point, I would like to amend the original motion to include, and I guess if I'm looking at this on what was just handed out, the resolution, on page 5, that the base per pupil be the 4,015, which represents the 1.375 increase, and the CTE amount, or the SCA amount, excuse me, on page 15 be $59 per student from 7 through 12. And on page 11, where it references the PEP report for the pay raise, this was another issue I brought up at the task force meeting, that we can put in the resolution that the pay raise be based on the October 1 PEP report, not put a specific year in the event that the following year, if whatever proposed MFP was sent over and it was rejected and came back, and you fall to the prior year, which would be this one, that the raise would be based on that current year's employees and not something that might be a year or two old. So I'm asking for those particular amendments, move to amend the resolution in those particular areas.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion and second it.
So to be clear on the amendment that's on the floor right now, it would be to, you reference several pages here, Ms. Boucher, but it would be to actually have a level 1 increase of 1,375 as opposed to 125 plus the CTE dollars.
That's correct.
Okay. And Dr. Jones, and plus with one technical edit for the PEP report having no year referenced.
Correct.
Okay. So members, the motion on the floor right now, to make sure everyone's on the same page, is to have the 1,375 level 1 increase as opposed to the current proposed 125 level 1 increase, and to remove the SCA allocation, and to make one technical edit for PEP report to not include a year designation in the report. So, Dr. Jones, comment?
Yes. You know, the difficulty in things like this is that there's not usually a bad proposal that comes forward. And that's the case here as well. I mean, we have competing interests that are both great interests. I have to make my decision based on what's best for the folks that I represent, and I represent probably the most rural districts in the state and the widest geographic dispersion. And the problem that I have is that I know for a fact that several of districts in my area are in severe financial straits. And the 1.275, 375?
375.
The 1.375 is a critical thing for those districts. You know, I would love to do more supplemental course allocation. I would love to do some other things as well. I'd love to do some early childhood. But with what we have available for us and with what's on the table today, I just feel like that when the majority of the overwhelming majority of the task force recommended it, and the Superintendent's Association, and I can't tell you the number of text messages and emails and phone calls I've had over the past few days from the districts, and not just superintendents. I've had them from principals. I've had them from teachers. So you know, that's why I have to support Ms. Fauche's recommendation.
Ms. Evanston?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to understand, the 1.375 is monies that the district would get, and they could do whatever they want to do in terms of what they're...
It's unrestricted.
Unrestricted. What superintendent is recommending is less than that. Is that right? Because some of the money we want to direct to the course choice programs. Is that right?
That is correct. The recommendation would be to designate some piece of that towards school choice or course choice. Sorry.
Okay.
Superintendent, did you want to clarify not on that?
I do. I just want to make sure we're clear on restricted versus unrestricted.
Exactly.
$101 million of it is restricted, and everyone here is, and I am, okay with it being restricted. I took from the superintendents, from the school boards, from the unions, and all their testimony, the charter schools, everybody is okay with $101 million being restricted, a raise. Doesn't matter whether you gave a local raise. You're okay with it being restricted. $36 million is unrestricted. I think everybody here is okay with that, for all the reasons Dr. Jones said. All good with that. 2% of $140 million under our proposal, which is about $3 million, would be for limited uses within school systems, limited to industry-based credentials, the tests necessary for that, the training of teachers for dual enrollment, the training of teachers for career education. Every district gets it, same amount of money as you would if it were unrestricted, but it's just a little restricted. And that's because the need expressed at the task force, even if it wasn't part of the final proposal, the need and the evidence that I see in front of us is that every time we give an increase to dual enrollment, more kids sign up. And there's a reason right now that some districts are charging kids hundreds of dollars. Frankly, your district charges kids dollars. I'm not saying that about you, but it's charged in that district because there's a financial need to fund dual enrollment. That's the evidence I see in front of us. Therefore, the best thing that I think we can do with 2% of the money is, as with the 101%, the 101 million, restricted to a specific use. So I don't think anybody should be objecting to this based on it just being restricted. Most of what's being proposed is restricted. The question is, do you think restricting that 2% to that use is better than just a general use? And I think we've got too many kids who can't do dual enrollment because they have to pay, who can't do an industry-based credential because it can't be afforded, to not try to subsidize this. And to the process questions, I think the process, as Ms. Vaucher and Dr. Jones articulated, has played out perfectly. You got a recommendation from the superintendents. I understand their perspective. They're one constituent and an important one. You've got a recommendation from the task force. I understand their perspective. That's a bunch of different constituencies represented there. I understand their perspective. All I'm doing today is try to bring forth the third stage of the process, which is our agency's interpretation. My view, they were 98% right. I'm asking for a tweak on the 2%. Because frankly, the kids who can't do dual enrollment, the kids who can't get the welding credential, those kids don't sit on the task force. Those kids don't sit on the Superintendent's Advisory Council. I'm asking for your support of 2% for them.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you for the clarification.
I do. I need
Dr.
clarification.
I'm
so sorry. That's okay. I just have a question because something came up in the testimony. I have heard about this in the last couple of days, but I need some clarity on how big of an issue this is or is not. What percentage of districts, or give me a number of districts that are not spending the money that's already there for course choice and dual enrollment?
Every dollar is spent. What happens is we put out all the dollars on an equity basis, just like level one. Mm-hmm. And then if a dollar doesn't get spent, districts raise their hand and say, I'll spend it. And then it gets reallocated late in the year, in March.
I want to know where the money's not getting spent.
I don't have a list off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share with you. What I can say is that every dollar is spent. And to make sure that every dollar is spent, when a dollar isn't spent, it gets redistributed. Now, to be fair, that's not like level one. And look, I know that the superintendents who are here, they've got real operating concerns, and they're legitimate. I'm not saying that they're not. Pensions need to be paid, health care needs to be paid, buses need to run, cafeteria workers, it's all true. I'm not saying it's not. But when we send a dollar out in level one, as Ms. Nealon said, we have no responsibility at that point for whether it actually gets spent or how it gets spent. And that may be the right way to fund. That is Dr. Jones expressed that opinion, Ms. Vaucher has. I'm not saying it's not. But a small percentage of it, I'm suggesting, may go to direct services so that we can be guaranteed that kids are provided equitable access to services that are in high demand and that right now are either not provided or are often provided for in exchange for fees that parents have to pay. That's all I'm suggesting.
So, Mr. Davis, my concern is about the equity of opportunity for students in the districts where the money's not getting spent. I applaud the districts who will raise their hand and say, we can spend that money. My question is, how big of an issue is this that students are in districts and that money's not getting spent in the districts. What that tells me is the opportunity is not getting to the student level, and that's where I have a concern.
That's definitely noted, Dr. Murphy. Ms. Holloway, you had a question and comment as well.
I do. I just need clarification from Mr. Superintendent White. I need to understand in level 1, we're going to distribute 1.357. Are the superintendents able, or do they have the autonomy to spend this dollar on dual enrollment, on welding, for any course choice?
Yeah.
Yes. Can they use that level 1 dollar to provide for the needs of high school students?
Well, they can use it on anything.
Okay.
And I think therein, you've noted it, Ms. Holloway, therein lies the issue. It's a question of when you estimate the cost. Remember, your job is to estimate the cost. Are you able to estimate it in a way that is purely at large, or are you estimating specific costs? And then are you allocating it based on specific costs or based on generally the cost of running school systems? I'm proposing that this is not a cost that is adequately captured in level 1. And if you need evidence of that, note that every time we've provided more funding in level 4, kids are taking advantage of it. Which means to me that simply funding level 1, you won't get people spending on it proportionate to the cost. The cost is hidden because when you put money in level 4, all of a sudden people start pursuing it. So you're right in concept. I think in practice it's sadly a different story.
Well, I want to believe that the superintendents have that flexibility and autonomy to run their systems and to spend that money where the need is. So that's what I'm having an issue with, meaning that I just feel that they have the autonomy. And I was just trying to understand the different levels.
I think, members, if you are concerned about autonomy, and that's going to be where your vote comes out, then I would encourage you to take an additional step to direct us to verify whether, in fact, those dollars were spent on dual enrollment and services in accordance, so that, presuming that many of you are here next year and presuming that I am, then we can come back and study the issue that Dr. Jones has been clear on his perspective on that issue. We can come back next year and study, the question that Ms. Holloway has raised. Do these dollars, when we increase the general funding, actually end up getting spent on specific student services?
Okay. Dr. Jones.
And I think Superintendent White has captured the issue very well. But when we talk about equity and so forth, I want it clear that superintendents have not had any spare money in districts for a good number of years. It's not that they don't want to do those things, it's that they have not had the resources to be able to do them because they've had to spend their money on other things as well. But when we talk about the equity issue, what has happened here is the districts that don't have the ability to provide that, and that don't spend the money, see that money go to other places, and those other places then, that increases the difference in equity between the small rural districts and the large urban districts. Because the districts that can make use of it, do make use of it, and they have a university close to them, or they have a course provider close to them and so forth, some of these other folks don't have it. If all the schools and the school districts were in great financial shape right now, I would unhesitantly vote for putting that extra school choice money there. But in the current condition of the school boards and across the state, and particularly in the small rural districts, every dollar is critical to them. And that's why, I think that's why we saw the outpouring of support from everybody all the way down to the high school principals and the elementary school principal level who've come forward. I don't want to give the impression that I'm anti-Jump Start 2.0 or anti-supplemental course. I love all that stuff. And John, if I could ask one question. If you did this, would you have to redistribute the money if they didn't spend it all? Or could you hold it as a carryover for them?
Yeah, you could hold it as a carryover. I mean, one way of doing this would be to put it there, but to direct the formula to keep it there if they choose not to spend it in that way.
See, I just feel like that a year from now, when we know what the financial conditions of these districts are and whether they've improved or not, then I would certainly think it would be a good time to revisit it. But this is just the first money these people have had in so long. And when you look at, for every dollar we give a teacher in a pay raise, the related benefits to it, somewhere approaching 30 cents on the dollar now.
Well, then, Dr. Jones, if I may, what I would ask then is that there be direction to the department and to the MFP task force or its successor, that being the legal term, next year for explicit study of the effects of this formula on dual enrollment and career and technical education. In other words, this is going to be a persistent issue, which is that we as a state are lagging behind in getting kids early college courses. And every year, the colleges, they've had their financial problems. But where does all this trickle down? It trickles down onto families who are having to borrow tons of money so their kids can get a couple years of college in. Because fees go up, tuition goes up, and we don't get them early college credits, so the cost of college continues to be a 4 or 5 year deal. The families are paying the price. And if you don't support the 2% being restricted, and you want it to be a full 1.375, I understand what you're saying. But we must put this issue on the table, as your resolution earlier did with early childhood education. And so I would ask you to include some mention of that in your motion to guide next year's process toward consideration and study of this issue.
Would you accept that, Doris, as a...
I think that could be a separate motion. I would not like it, like Shannon, I would not like to muddy the waters in its resolution.
Okay, so Ms. Vaucher, let's...
Yeah, I understand. I mean, there is a tremendous need out there for everything.
Yes.
Career tech ed, special education, technology, curriculum that is of quality. I understand when our state superintendent says it trickles down on families, so do all these other costs. Yeah. So does everything that we do within our K-12 educational process. In level 4, we have monies for the supplemental course allocation. We also have some monies in level 1, the CDF funds, that are built into that with a weighted factor, and then additional CDF funds that are already in the MFP. We have some high-cost services for special education in Title IV that you cannot access until you spend over 3 times the average cost per student for a special needs student. So unless you spend over, I think the last one was somewhere over $33,000 per student, then you could begin to access some of the high-cost monies. And as I mentioned before, the technology issues, the curriculum issues, the school safety issues, the teacher preparation issues, all of these things are vital, just as vital in many cases as the career tech. So while we're talking about possibly putting a few dollars more in career tech, we could have a whole lot of people throughout the state, if we were discussing other parts of this, such as special education, I'm not going to go through my whole list again, who would be here saying, we need more money in that area because I've got to buy my child a technology device, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. I think, again, we go back to what Ms. Holloway said, if that is a need in the district, it will be spent in the district if that need exceeds another need, because you've got that local friction and support, as well as to when budgets are presented in local school districts, people coming and talking about needing increased services in different areas. So I wish there was an unlimited amount of funds that we could use for all of these initiatives. But I'm very thankful that we're looking at the $140 million. And I do feel that, I guess just being repetitive, that the amended resolution is where we need to go this year.
Thank you, Ms. Faucher. Mr. Garber, you had a comment you want to make?
Yes, I'd like to speak against the current resolution and in support of the superintendent's original motion. And I'd like to start by trying to sum my point on this up with the saying that a lot of people have heard before, which is that the proof is in the pudding. I know you've heard that. The proof is in the pudding. That means, in other words, if something is working, then it is working. You can tell by the taste of the pudding. If it tastes good, it's good. When was the last time that you heard in Louisiana that we improved a measurement of our education system by 100%? When was the last time? Have you ever heard that we have improved a measurement of our education progress by 200%? I don't think anybody, I haven't heard people talk about that. The dual enrollment improvement over the past 4 years or 5 years since we have put this supplemental course allocation in place has improved 400%. That's the proof that's in the pudding. The only reason that it increased 400% was because we said this money is going to be used for dual enrollment or you're going to lose it. Some people have talked about equity for students. I think if you look at how much of this money has been unspent by some districts, you will see that the amount has gone down and down and down every year, because the districts, once they realized they have to either use the money or lose it, they have found ways to use it. And that is equity for the students. Another issue that people are not talking about here is that this is a jobs issue. It's a job issue for the children who get to do the dual enrollment, who get to do the CTE courses, and get a job that they would not otherwise have been able to get. But it's also job issues with the adults versus children. When you have school boards and superintendents deciding where money goes, they're going to put it into jobs that they control. If you let children decide where the money is going to be spent, they're liable to go down the street and take a CTE course at a provider that is not controlled by the school board associations or by the superintendent's associations. That's a real issue. People like to control the jobs. If you are for parental choice and children choice in education, then you should be for the original proposal that the superintendent put forth. 2% is all he's asking for, to let the parents and the children decide how to spend $3 million out of $140 million. 2%. That's it. But what can we get out of that 2%? We can get more of the 400% type increase that we have gotten in the last 5 years. For those reasons, I would vote against this amendment and support instead the original proposal of the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Was there any other comments on this end? All right, so we've had a discussion on this amendment. The amendment before you is to change from the proposal to change from a 1.25 level 1 increase to a 1.375 level 1 increase, and to disregard the level 4 allocation for SCA.
Would we have a roll call on this, please?
Wait.
Certainly.
Mr. Davis.
Additionally, there's a PEP adjustment to remove the year designation of that.
Mr. Chair.
Jones?
I actually just have a follow-up for Jim. I know you're about to call
Certainly,
the vote.
go ahead.
Jim, I'm compelled, appreciate the perspective, the passion, couldn't agree more with all that you've said, in fact. I'm trying to really square that with our board's history. We have a strong track record. First of all, I need to say this is such an important conversation for our state to be having, and we should feel so lucky and fortunate that we are in the position to be having this conversation about more resources that serve our schools, that serve our systems, our kids, our teachers, of course. To your point in particular, we have a history on this board of prioritizing district flexibility and accountability, right? And you and I represent New Orleans, and that has been a primary mechanism for advancing impact and outcomes in our own district. How do you square that with with the points you've just made? Because that's actually the tension that I'm balancing right now.
Well, I would square it by pointing out that we are for several different things on this board. One of the things that we have been for is parental choice and student choice in education.
Absolutely.
And I think I pointed out how this works in that direction. We should let the children, sometimes maybe 2% of the time,
decide,
choose which. Accountability, as you pointed out, a 400% increase in dual enrollment. That is accountability. When we give this money to the districts 6 years ago, when we gave this kind of money to the districts and said, you know, we really need y'all to spend some of this money on dual enrollment, we didn't get a 400% increase. It was not until we said, we're going to hold you accountable. You either use it for this or you lose it. Either use this 2%, and you can take 98% and do whatever you want with it. 2%, use it or lose it. We've gotten a 400% increase. So I would say that's how you tie it into accountability.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So if we said that, we made that mandate, we got a 400% increase, then you don't feel like the districts are doing what they need to be doing? Do you feel like the superintendents are not wanting to have their kids enroll in choice and dual enrollment?
Well, if you had asked me that 2 years ago,
I'm asking you that now.
3 years ago, I would have said, you know, since we put the supplemental course allocation in place and restricted $14 million out of, or maybe it was $10 million when we started, out of $7 billion, that's less than 2%. When we restricted $14 or $10 million to only be used for supplemental course allocation, dual enrollment, we got a 100% increase.
Okay.
If you had asked me, isn't 100% good enough? I'd have said no. I think we need to keep this in place until we get a 400% increase.
But you don't.
And we did, and we did. We did keep it in place. We pumped it up an extra $4 million and got 400% increase. And now you're asking me, is 400 enough? No. I think we need 600 and 800% increase. And I think we can get it if we put more money into this. As the superintendent said, every time we have put more money into this, more children have taken advantage of it and dual enrolled in college and career tech education. So no, I don't think 400 is good enough. I want 500, 600, 700. If we are going to get out of the last place in the nation, second to last, third to last, we need to keep stuff like this going. This is what's working. The proof is in the pudding. It's working. Let's keep doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. All right, members, we have covered this extensively. It's time to vote on it. Remember that a vote for the amendment would be to increase level 1 funding to 1,375, make the PEP change, and eliminate the SCA funding.
Yes.
A vote against that amendment would be to keep the original recommendation. We are going to have a roll call vote. Is everyone clear now?
No.
Okay.
Okay. The second part, I'm clear on.
If you vote for this amendment,
right,
then we're going to be increasing level 1 funding to 1.375
with the teacher pay raises. That's
correct.
And what was the other part?
There's a technical edit.
Okay. Okay. Good. But if we vote against,
then you're going back to the original recommendation by the department.
Okay.
Okay.
But it would take a separate motion to also get that through.
Correct. We're going to go back to that one. Yes.
Right.
This is just on the amendment. Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Bowlby?
No.
Dr. Bowlby votes no. Ms. Edmonston?
Yes.
Ms. Edmonston votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
No.
Mr. Garvey votes no. Ms. Holloway?
Yes.
Ms. Holloway votes yes. Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Jones votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
No.
Ms. Orange Jones votes no. Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Mr. Rock votes yes. Dr. Thomason?
Yes.
Dr. Thomason votes yes. Ms. Vautier?
Yes.
Ms. Vautier votes yes. Do you want to vote now? I'll let
No
you
need.
vote. 6 yes, 3 no.
Mr. Chairman, What motion is on the table now?
The original motion, recommendation by the department, I'm sorry, with the amendment passed. So the motion on the table at this point is to cover the certificated, not certificated raises, a 1.375% increase to level 1. That's it, plus the other technical changes authorization, the PEP change in there.
Didn't we just pass that?
Yeah, we just passed.
That's what we just passed.
Everything passed.
We passed.
Right. I made
the
a motion
amendment.
to accept the
Well, that's
resolution
right.
with those
Okay.
amendments.
So
Yeah, we're
You
through.
don't have another, have to vote
I'm
on it.
sorry, I stand corrected.
Yeah, we're through.
Wise man can be corrected. I'm sorry. Try to get it all right. Messed up
But
everything.
Mr. Davis, I would like to note for the record why it's not a good idea for an educator to argue with a lawyer about anything, because Mr. Garvey just beat the trash out of me there.
And there
Didn't
we have
win,
it.
didn't carry though, so.
All right, so
Mr. Davis, did we get anywhere in there the study of the work for the following year? I know that was something that we talked about. I'm not sure if the motion ever made it to the table.
we did not. We want to take that separately. That's what
Okay.
I want to see. So if there's a member who may want to put it
I
to
was
the
planning to
line.
make that motion. I just wanted Superintendent White to phrase it for me exactly how you want it.
May I?
Yes,
Are you
please.
okay? Tell me, Gary, if this is okay. Move to direct the department to analyze trends over time and by district in dual enrollment and jumpstart courses, and to report these trends to BESE, the Board of Regents, appropriate legislative committees, and the MFP task force or its successor at the conclusion of the fall 2019 semester.
So moved.
Second.
All right, board, you have a motion in front of you. Any questions or comments on that?
Who's second?
Ms. Orange-Jones? Ms. Boucher?
Okay, and I'm not opposed to that motion, but I would also like to include, I realize how important, career tech is, but I also realize how important some of these other initiatives are in terms of quality curriculum in each and every school district, meaning Tier 1 curriculum, in terms of sufficient services for special education students, and how everyone has responded to that, and if it's funded adequately. So if we're looking at career tech, can we also look at, and I hate to even, we've been kicking around for years, the cost of the true cost of educating a child here in Louisiana. So instead of one very narrow initiative or report, aren't we going to look at this whole funding structure and what it really costs to educate the child in every aspect and not just in this particular one? Because while this is an extremely important initiative and we have gotten good return, anytime you appropriate additional funding for something and dedicate that funding, then it is going to be used if you're going to use it for that, and this is a very good initiative to use it on, but so are some of these others. And I just have a real problem with just a very narrow look at where are we going in the future as opposed to a more holistic look at how do we accommodate every child and what do we do that's best for that child and that parent who's a special needs child, who is enough technology there for them, where are we scoring academically in the core areas, are all the school systems using Tier 1 and high quality curriculum. So while this is a very important initiative, so are these others. So I don't want these others to get lost. We just looked at early childhood that we all agree has been ignored for many, many years in this state, and we need to look in that direction as well. So is there a possibility that we look and we take all these different aspects of what these high need areas are?
Ms. Boucher, respectfully, I would ask that since you noted at the get-go of that you're not against this particular motion, that I would defer back to what was referenced by Mr. Garvey earlier and in the last item of business for the ongoing reports, including MFP reports, that information is covered in there, but we may look into using that as a better vehicle to cover a wider array at this point to leave this motion clean on this item.
Well, I don't mind leaving this motion clean as long as we're all realizing that when we are directing or looking to the MFP task force or its successor in whatever form it is, that we're looking at what is the total cost of funding education for the children in Louisiana. This initiative, as well as and in conjunction with all of these others as well. And I know that the last few years with the task force, we have been hamstringed because of a lack of revenue in this state, a lack of availability of funds. Hopefully the Revenue Estimating Conference is going to recognize some additional revenues that will be freed up for some other areas. But we've got to take more of a broader look at this other than just one initiative.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
And I do have to say, I have to just make this comment because superintendents and boards do not look just at jobs they can control. They look at what is best for the students and the families in their districts. And I just have to go on record as saying.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Beaufort, comment on this motion?
Yes, Mr. Davis. I'm going to kind of comment on this motion. So I will say I support this motion. I think it's really good for us to pay attention where this money's going, and the extent to which we can get support to children, we should absolutely be doing that. I also just want to say that unfortunately the way that the last amendment was worded is that I don't think that my support of the teacher pay raise is going to be noted on record the way it should, and I wanted to take this time to say that I hope that the legislature is able to pass that pay raise.
Noted. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? With no questions or comments, any objection to the motion? Hearing no objection, the motion carries. Next item, please.
That concludes your agenda.